Well, it's coming up to the Christmas holidays, so I thought why not take a look at another iconic radio, one that you probably missed or never really thought about. However, it did appear for a few pivotal minutes to help save the main characters towards the end of a very famous film. This is a movie that has since grossed over $1 billion worldwide, and all of the stars of the movie are quite well known, apart from this one maybe. The movie is of course Jurassic Park. The radio that inspired the one that was used in the movie is the Motorola Sabre. Now, before we look at the prop version of this radio, let's have a quick look at the real Motorola Sabre. The Motorola Sabre was launched in 1989 and was initially designed for and destined for use by the US military. It was a radio that at the time was instantly noticeable due to its unique slim form factor, differing quite significantly from radios that had been launched previously by other manufacturers, including Motorola themselves. There were 6 versions of the Sabre radio launched from 1989, and the main one used as a reference for the one used in the film was the Sabre II. This radio was slightly taller than the original Sabre radio and had a backlit display and 3 simple buttons to access the radio's menu system on the front. It had a basic volume on-off control on the top and a channel selector switch. It was possible at the time to have the radio programmed with up to 120 channels. The radios could be spec'd as a basic radio with no encryption, the radio being called the non-secure radio, and in a variant called the secure version, which was in the longer case to accommodate the encryption/decryption board. The radios were offered in 3 band variants: mid-band, which covered 66 to 88 MHz, VHF, which covered 136 to 174 MHz, and UHF, which covered 403 to 512 MHz. The radios were widely used by the police, government agencies and private users worldwide right up until the late 1990s. The mid-band variants of the radio, sitting at 66 to 88 MHz, have since then appeared for sale second-hand and have been converted by hams to the 4 or the 6 metre band. The VHF variants to 2 metres and the UHF ones to 70 centimetres respectively. There is no one Sabre that can cover all of the bands though. They were strictly single-band radios even under this conversion. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the real radios here because the prop radio was quite different in many ways and wasn't even a real radio. Now, as some of you know if you watch this channel, you'll know that I pick out and design in 3D rare and hard to get and more often movie specific radios, and in some cases make my own versions of the radio using my 3D printers. I started off with the Pi PF8 from the TV show The Professionals, then moved on to the Berndet BE470, which has appeared in almost every UK TV drama since its inception, the Back to the Future Archer Space Patrol radio, the Die Hard TH21BT radio, the Stranger Things TRC214, and now this, the Sabre II, which you will see unfold if you continue to watch. In the movie we first see the radios at about 97 minutes into the film, when Hammond, played by Richard Attenborough, needs to get the power switch back on, but needs to guide Ellie, played by Laura Dern, across the park from a set of plans he hastily removes from a drawer. Ellie looks puzzled as to how he is going to relay the info to her, and he stares in the direction of a rack of walkie-talkies. She switches on 2 of the sets and hands one to Hammond and takes one for herself. Now, as I have already mentioned, these weren't real radios. I've looked very closely at the prop radios which do turn up from time to time on memorabilia auction sites. Now, the sets are really sought after by collectors because they are unique in that they were based on the real Sabre radios. However, they were smaller and in terms of operation very different. The first thing to point out is that both the TX light on the top of the radio lights up during receive and transmit, and that the radio appears to have a dual line display, when in reality the real radio only had a single line display for characters. Like many movies, the art director and or the set director or even Spielberg himself probably deliberated on the design because it's a bit of a mix of all of the first 4 radios, sharing its physical size with the first radio, the antenna of the Sabre 1E and the display and buttons of the Sabre II. Now, you might ask why the production company Amblin Entertainment, who had previously produced films such as E.T. and the Back to the Future trilogy, would not just use real radios and would actually go to the effort of making their own. Very often in movies it's quicker to make props than to acquire them, believe it or not. It may well also have been due to the size and weight of the radios, as Laura and the stunt team would be diving around with the radios on, and they're pretty heavy. There is also the requirements of product placement from the manufacturer that sometimes don't sit well with the director or the production company. For instance, Kenwood Radio insisted on branding front and in particular on the rear of the TH21BT Hero radio used in the Die Hard movies. Rear branding on this radio was never a retail thing though, so it looked odd. Also, significant things like a nice bright green lit display, the real radio having nowhere near the same level of luminance, and the requirement for a bright light to indicate the radio was on was key here. It was likely just easier to mould their own ones from resin, and let's face it, in a movie where they were going to use a lot of resin anyway, I very much doubt, as some have suggested, that the cost of the radios was an issue. Even at a price of $2,000 a radio back then in 1993, this was literal dust in a movie whose budget was $63 million, which is about $120 million in today's money. From what I can gather reading online, they made two versions of this prop for the movie, a hollow, cast, one-piece resin unit with a working backlight and LED, and a more complete two-part radio with working on-off switch and a removable battery. One assumes these are the radios used in the close-up scenes of Hammond, with the more simple versions being used in the racks and carried by Laura's character Ellie. In the scene in the control room, Ellie can be seen switching the radios on before she takes them out of the rack. There are two great videos that I will link to in the description here. The first one that I saw was from the Jurassiccollectables channel, where they show a really well used version of the prop with hand-drawn labels and such. It's missing the battery clip and the battery strap bar off the back, but it is very likely that this is one of the sets shown on the rack in the control room. It doesn't appear to have a working on-off switch though, although it is possible that this has been swapped out at a later date. The second video that I saw was from Cyrix9445, who has a more complete version of the radio with a working on-off switch and a battery clip. Having looked very closely at the Ultra HD 4K version of the movie, I think that this is the actual set used by Richard Attenborough's character Hammond in the film. This set has the fully working removable battery pack and the labels front and rear. The front mounted Motorola label on this set is not apparent on the ones shown in the movie. It may have been added by a previous owner on this radio, or the units may have been used by Motorola in some promotional form in the intervening years, although this is rather unlikely. On both of these prop radios, the channel selector switch is not a functional switch, and in the movie, Hammond's character sort of goes to switch the channel switch round. He is of course pretending to do so. Ellie's character instructs Hammond that she is on channel 2, alerting Hammond to change channels. Hammond's radio is on channel 6 according to the display, and of course doesn't change to display channel 2 once switched, because in reality it's a clear piece of tape stuck on the screen. I hope that I am not destroying the movie magic for you all out there. I better not mention the fact that the dinosaurs weren't real as well. Thankfully, the auction listing shows the measurements of the radio, and importing this image into Design Spark, it allows me to scale up the image to size and make the first initial trace around the unit. Then it's just a case of modelling each section in turn by closely looking at the reference photos and the stills taken from the two actual prop videos. So the intention here is to make a prop radio that is both functional and screen accurate. I also will make the radio so that down the line I can also add in a real radio system so that it can actually be used as a functional set, although as you can imagine that is quite a lot more work, and my experience with the Back to the Future radio is that people just love the fact that when you turn it on it plays clips from the movie, so that is my main goal here. So we're looking to match the prop and not a real Motorola Sabre. As the model started to take shape in the 3D program and I looked at the real radio, it became evident with all of the curves and lines that this would really benefit from being resin printed. So I picked up a new Elegoo Mars 2 mono printer and the companion curing station. The addition of these two items will make producing a nice smooth unlined prop that will need little sanding and or further attention. So after about 2 solid days of 3D modelling, I was finally happy with the design in CAD. Now I could buy off the shelf parts for a Sabre like the antenna and the knobs etc, but I wanted to make this 100% from scratch, with the only parts that are off the shelf being the electronics inside it, which are pretty easy to get a hold of. Also in the future I may make a few of these up and put them up for sale if folks are interested. So in the next episode we will start printing off the parts and we'll design and print the labels and other bits, and at the end of that episode you will see the finished radio. So please stay tuned, and if you have enjoyed this video please give me a thumbs up and or a thumbs down if you haven't. Again, a big shout out to both Cyrix9445 and Jurassiccollectables for allowing me to use their footage in this video. Please head over to their channels, the links are below in the description. Until next time.